Is the iPad mini 5th generation still worth it in 2025? That's the question I wanted to ask myself. Does an old school tablet like this still have valuable use cases in today's needs? In today's video, we're going to talk about why this iPad is absolutely still relevant in today's needs, and some things that you might want to look out for if you're using it in 2025. So, let's talk tech. Now, before we get going, I want to hear from you down below. Are you still using an older iPad? I'd be curious to know if somebody's using something older than an iPad mini 5th generation. The iPad mini 5th generation just came out, and at the time it was featuring Apple's latest and greatest technology and the most up-to-date software, iOS 12. Back then it wasn't even iPad OS. It was just a larger, big screen version of the same iOS 12 that shipped on the iPhone XR that came out just a few months before that. At this time, it was using the latest and greatest A12 Bionic chip, still had a lightning port because the switch to USB-C wasn't until the next iPad mini, and it still had Touch ID, which for many people and fans of Touch ID, that's great, but for some of the people that are hardcore fans of Face ID, well, that's a little bit lacking in the times. At an overall height of about 8 inches and an overall width of a little over 5 inches, the iPad mini really hit the sweet spot for being able to be pocketable. You can put it in, a backpack or in your coat pocket, while also easily being able to hold it in your hand and have a larger experience than what you would be having on like an iPhone 16 Pro Max, for example. Being the mini form factor, it doesn't skimp on performance because Apple doesn't treat their mini devices as dumbed down versions of the bigger iPads and iPhones. It had all of the latest and greatest stuff that the standard iPad had at the time, just in a much smaller footprint. It's also extremely lightweight as well, with the cellular coming in at 308 grams, while the Wi-Fi is coming in right at 300 grams. With its compact design and form factor, it makes it such a seamless and natural decision to want to put this in my backpack when I'm traveling, in case I want to read a book or I want to watch a movie while I'm on the go. Speaking of traveling, what's incredibly helpful with having a cellular iPad is having incredibly reliable cellular service. That's why I recommend the partner of today's video, Mint Mobile. With cellular iPads being incredibly convenient for travel, what you need when you're out and about is a strong and reliable cell service. And if you didn't know, Mint Mobile offers premium, reliable service for less than you might think. With unlimited plans for as little as $15 a month, you can get access to the nation's largest 5G network, which is great because saving money on wireless should not come at the cost of quality service. Switching to Mint is incredibly easy. You can bring your own phone, your own number, even your own contacts. It can be done online right now for only a few minutes with their eSIM service. This makes saving money incredibly quick and easy, so use our link down below, mintmobile.com/ardently, or scan this QR code right here. You can use these resources to get signed up today. Big thanks to Mint Mobile for partnering with us for today's video. So another thing that I really appreciate about the iPad mini 5th generation is the display. This features a 7.9-inch LCD, which gets reasonably bright enough for most situations, coming in at 500 nits. While the colors are sharp and vibrant and all that good stuff, what I really appreciate is the true tone display. So what this does is it automatically adjusts the intensity of the screen to match whatever is the ambient lighting situation around you. This really makes a big difference when I'm using the iPad here in my office in a darker environment, or if I'm out in the living room under bright daylight LEDs, or I'm in bed in a, dimmer environment with warmer lighting. Even if I'm in a darker situation, or if I really just need it to be even darker than the lowest setting, I can adjust it even more with a shortcut that I have set up by triple tapping the home button to reduce the white point, which makes a very big difference as well. Even though the display still holds up after all of these years, where this really shines is in the compatibility. So even though this is 6 years old, this can still run the latest iPad OS 18. Now, at the time of recording this video, iPad OS 18 is currently the current OS for iPads, which just came out a few months ago. This still runs all of the apps that I use on the daily, whether it's reading apps like comic books and manga or whatever is the case, or just general content consumption like YouTube, Disney+, Crunchyroll, all that other stuff. This runs laps around all of the regular day-to-day usage that I would normally do, along with your standard stuff like surfing the web and reading emails. It can handle other Apple ecosystem features like a champ. I'm talking about stuff like AirDrop, handoff, even Sidecar, which Sidecar, real quick, is incredibly convenient, especially on this small screen, because basically, as long as I have my iPad with me, I have a second monitor with me whenever I'm traveling or on the go, which really helps to elevate my mobile productivity. Handoff is also used just about every single day because I'm pretty much cycling between my phone, my iPad, and my Mac equally all throughout the day. So it's very quick and easy to just start looking something up on one device and quickly hand it off and do all of the same features just on a bigger display and experience if I go from my phone to my Mac, for example. The iPad's innate ability to contribute to my production flow is just insane to me, that I can do just about everything I would need an iPad to do, regardless of it being 6 years old. Now, that's all on the software side. How about the hardware? How has the hardware held up after all of this time? The hardware is still incredibly useful and compatible with my workflow. So when I'm looking at different accessories like the Apple Pencil, for example, the first generation Apple Pencil works great with iPad mini 5th generations. Now, you also have access to just other off-brand smart stylus pens, and those work incredibly well as well. In this compatibility with other smart pens, I have access to be able to doodle and draw and, write different things that people would normally want to do on newer iPads with newer Apple Pencils that they would normally do on the daily. Now, I won't be able to do all of the same hardcore features and nuanced features that like the Apple Pencil Pro can do, but I at least have access to be able to do some of these things to a little bit more of a basic extent than I would on an older iPad that's just not compatible. Also, with this being an Apple product, it's incredibly easy to find accessories like universal Bluetooth keyboards, for example, that just work great with this. Of course, you have access to all of these specific cases and screen protectors and different options for the screen protectors than you would with some of the other older brands, whether it's like an older Samsung tablet or an Asus tablet or even Amazon's own Fire. The compatibility with AirPods and just other Bluetooth earbuds that have multi-point connection is great. Just being able to seamlessly switch between the iPad or your phone or iPad and computer, it's just great having this naturally fit into really any ecosystem that you might have. Speaking of the hardware, Touch ID is probably my favorite part of it. So I love being able to have that dedicated button, that dedicated feature that just works great. Now, I know there's big avid fans of Face ID, and even on my 15 Pro Max, I have Face ID, so I'm forced to have to use that every day. But between Face ID and Touch ID, I much prefer Touch ID because it doesn't matter how I'm looking at the phone, how bright or dark my environment is. I just know that using Touch ID is always going to work as long as my hands are clean. But even though there's a ton of things that just work on the iPad mini 5, there are some things that I'm just not a fan of. But before I get into that, I do want to remind you to drop a like down below if you are finding value in this video. And also, if you are a fan of tech at all, consider subscribing, because we here at Ardently Tech believe that tech was made to make our lives easier. We believe that it was made to improve our lives, but that doesn't always mean getting the latest, greatest, or most expensive tech that's out there. So subscribe so you don't miss another video like this. So as I said earlier, I love the size, the brightness, the colors of the display, all of that stuff. All of those aspects make me forget that I am looking at 6-year-old hardware. But you know what doesn't make me forget that I'm looking at 6-year-old hardware and reminds me painfully every single time I pick it up? Holy bezels, Batman. Now, I have to be honest with myself and say that I am not the biggest bezel hater. Bezels in general don't really bother me because I like the idea of being able to physically hold onto something at the front of the device, the front of the screen, and not accidentally press something on the screen or activate something. But when I'm consuming media, or if I'm just looking at the iPad, the bezels really take you out of it because of just the way that bezels on Apple products are. They're just massive and they're huge, and the chins and the foreheads are just insane. Now, if you're considering a newer iPad mini, The iPad mini 5th gen is the last iPad mini to feature this bezel design, and so moving up to the iPad mini 6 or the latest iPad mini 7, you're gonna forego that bezel, completely, because it's also removed the Touch ID sensor. So you're giving up the quality and reliability of Touch ID for a much larger and better screen experience. So kind of pick your poison, which way you're gonna go on that. Another issue I have with the iPad mini 5th generation is the extremely limited storage size and the lack of expandability. This came out in 2019, which, even though that's 6 years old at this point, 2019, we had much larger storage demands at that time. This isn't 2010. So that's just something to think about if you are considering getting a iPad mini 5th generation, is just the extremely small size that you're gonna get, because you're very quickly going to eat through that storage with just photos, documents, and the occasional downloaded Prime Video or Disney Plus video, for example. With everything said though, there is a lot more to love about the iPad mini 5th generation than there is to hate, even though it is 6 years old at this point. It's the iPad mini that still meets the needs of most use cases out there. It doesn't have as modern a look of an iPad mini that you would expect to see in 2025, but it does all of the things that it does very well. And it does all of this at a fraction of the cost of a new iPad. There are, of course, features in newer iPads that this iPad mini just doesn't have, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about looking back in time to see if the iPad mini still holds up after all of these years. And the answer, despite its faults, is still a resounding yes. But let me know what you think down below. And if you're curious about an older iPad, then definitely check out this video on the iPad 9th generation. Or if you're looking at actually free iPad apps that don't slap you in the face with a paywall, well, definitely check out this video right here. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.